right, as I said there, the polls are closed and counting has begun in this year's local elections, the largest since 2019. The Tories are braced for what could be a difficult night ahead, while Labour are hoping that they've done enough to prove they've got what it takes to win the next general election. Now, we won't know for sure who the winners and losers are until well into tomorrow, but with 230 council seats up for grabs, it really is all to play for. So, where are the ones to watch? Well, first up is Dartford. It's currently Conservative run. All 42 seats of the district council are up for election. The parliamentary seat has flipped between Labour and the Tories over the years, and a win here would show that Sir Keir Starmer's party is on track for the next general election. But up next is Dudley, where a third of the council seats are up for grabs. The Tories took chunks out of Labour's red wall here in 2019, and we are keeping a close eye out for any swing away from the government tonight. And finally, the whole council is up for election in South Gloucestershire. Now, not only are the ruling Conservatives battling Labour here, but also the Liberal Democrats. So it would be a loss of 3 seats overall for the Tories to lose their majority, also one to keep an eye on. Well, let's find out exactly what those local elections are going to mean for Labour and the Conservatives, because, as I've said, they will have a huge impact come the next general election. And I am joined tonight by a top panel to take us through all of that. Ryan Sabey, the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun newspaper, Lord Robert Hayward, who is our polling expert, of course, Isabel Hardman, Deputy Editor of The Spectator magazine, and Sebastian Payne, who is the man who wrote the book on the Red Wall, but also the director of Onward think tank. Lovely to have you all with us. And of course, team, I brought sweets because it wouldn't be a local election night without them. So we can crack on with those shortly. But Ryan, I'm going to start with you. I mean, the polls are closed. We've been talking about it there. How will the main parties be feeling tonight, do you think?
I think they'll be apprehensive, actually. Keir Starmer under a lot of pressure. He's been ahead in those polls for the best part of a year, 2 years or so. So I really think he would be trying to turn into fruition that poll lead into seats. He should be putting on those boxing gloves and really having that knockout blow. But it might not be as good news for him as he expects. And the Conservatives have done that expectation management. They said that they're going to lose 1,000 seats. They might be 500. So they're just playing that waiting game to see how many they do actually lose. But there'll be something in it for everyone, I think, at the end of the night.
Yeah, and we're going to come on to talk about this because the story for Labour and the Conservatives is a little bit clearer. But there's quite a lot going on for the Liberal Democrats and the independent parties too. I mean, why, for example, in South Gloucestershire, is that an important fight for the Liberal Democrats? It's just one area, but it's a good example of what they're looking to do.
Well, you look at that part of the country and then you go down into the southwest, there's going to be lots of battleground seats come that next general election, and there's going to be head-to-head fights between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. If you can see that the Conservatives are slipping up a little bit and the Liberal Democrats are pushing on, that might be where a story comes in the next year or the next 18 months when that general election actually does take place.
Yeah. Lord Hayward, you helped us choose those 3 particular areas tonight to look at. And they may not be the ones that people had expected. I mean, we've been talking about Medway and Stockton, for example. I'm interested in why you chose Dartford as a place to keep an eye on.
As you indicated in the intro, Dartford as a parliamentary constituency has gone backwards and forwards between Conservatives and Labour. If the Labour Party are going to be seriously considered to have the chance of having an overall majority, Dartford is the sort of place they have to take and take easily. We talk about the Red Wall, that just erodes the Conservative overall majority. Places like Dartford and Stourbridge in Dudley Borough and other seats like that are the ones on which the Labour Party would make its overall majority or not.
And Ryan, Labour have been, as you indicated in your first answer, they've been quite careful, haven't they? They've been talking about the number of 400 seats. They've been saying, oh, it might not be as easy as you think. The Conservatives might not lose in as big a numbers as we hoped. Are they doing that because they genuinely believe that this might go wrong for them, or are they doing it because they want to have a much bigger win when it finally does inevitably come?
I think they want to see that bigger win so they can say that they're making those massive inroads and they've really put the pressure on the Conservatives, because the more pressure they can put on that now, it will really hammer the base. That supporter base won't come out, perhaps, and be on the ground and actually vote for them and support them. So it's going to be very difficult for the Conservatives if that is the case. So Labour will be looking to make that extra ground tonight, and we'll have to see what happens tomorrow afternoon when we get a clear picture of what actually has happened.
Yeah, I mean, Sebastian, let's pick up on Labour, because although you are now director at Onward, I mean, Labour is kind of your area of expertise in terms of the Red Wall. And we talked a little bit there about Dudley and the Red Wall and why it might matter. Do you have any sense that the Conservatives are losing their grip on that area, that it might not be as strong as they had hoped, and that Labour might make some ground here?
I think it could actually cut both ways. So I think one interesting place to look as the results come in will be Redcar in the northeast of England. That's a place where some local Conservatives are quite hopeful at making some gains there, because the kind of post-2016 realignment where more working-class pro-Brexit voters are going towards the Conservatives, there's hope that that will still remain true. But I think, as Lord Hayward was just saying, you know, the Red Wall goes on top of the traditional voting patterns. It doesn't replace them. So if the Conservatives are not doing so well elsewhere in the country, and it'll be the same in the Red Wall. But I think you will see signs that that kind of realignment is still happening, it is still taking place. But for Labour, they do need to make significant gains there, because that for them is the bedrock of any kind of majority in the next general election. So particularly for Labour and for Keir Starmer, they'll be looking to see in places like Dudley, in the northeast and the northwest, are they making gains? Are they winning back those traditional places? And for the Conservatives, it'll be about holding on, and if they make gains, all for the better.
I mean, Isabel, let's take that Conservative point. I mean, is it enough for them just to make a few small gains? Because 2019 was really, obviously, clearly very bad for them the last time around. Is that enough, or is there a number that they have to be reaching in order to be competitive at the next general election, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two questions. One is whether they're competitive at the next general election, and the other is the question of which number, what level should they hit for the party not to go into meltdown. And, I mean, the party is always in semi-meltdown, but for it to really sort of heat up, and for the people who don't like Rishi Sunak, who want to, you know, bring back Boris Johnson, or, I don't know, set up a Liz Truss think tank or something like that, for them to really start buzzing around, that's one of the really interesting questions. I think if we're looking for a noisy impact tomorrow, from whatever result, will be disappointed, and not just because obviously the coronation is just going to muffle everything, but also because people I've been talking to on the sort of pro-Boris side of the party have been saying really that the fallout from bad local elections results would be much more in terms of Rishi Sunak not being able to get business through the Commons, having more rebellions. I mean, it's quite difficult to see what he'd have rebellions on, because he's not bringing anything into the Commons. He's being so timid at the moment for exactly that reason.
I mean, Lord Hayward, you were laughing there at the idea... Robert, you were laughing at the idea of, I don't know whether it was the Liz Truss think tank that got you or the Boris Johnson comeback, but if these results are bad for the Conservative Party, is that a prospect, do you think?
Oh, the Tory party, and it's not just at the top, any political party that does well below level of expectation, whatever that may happen to be, has a fit all the way down. The morale goes from the worker base right through to the top of the party. So yes, what's been striking over the last few weeks is that actually there hasn't been the talk about Boris comeback or you know, Liz Truss or whatever, as the Tory party have slightly improved in the opinion polls. And in fact, many MPs have been out, even some who've been strong supporters of Boris, have discovered actually that people are talking on the doorstep favourably about Rishi. It's been a relatively quiet period. And there's no question that Rishi as Prime Minister and the top of the Tory party will want to get results that were within the range of acceptability so that the infighting doesn't resurrect itself in a way that it was running up to the Windsor framework.
Yeah, and Ryan, I suppose that does mean that there are more demands on the Labour Party. I mean, just over the last couple of days, they've really pushed this idea of housing. I mean, that's clearly an issue that Sir Keir Starmer believes that he's got a stronger card to play on. Are you picking up on any of those other issues that on the doorstep are translating into people changing their vote?
Well, I think one thing that's always come through over the past year or so has been that small votes issue that always comes up, whether it's a local issue or as a national issue. But I've been speaking to MPs who've been knocking doors today, and they say issues like potholes and bin collections are the ones that really can make the difference to this local elections. That's why sometimes you can't always translate from the local election to the national picture. So this will just give us a little flavour about where we are a year out from that general election.
Yeah, and Seb, you know, your speciality now is policy. Are you seeing anything that excites you in these local election campaigns?
Maybe not the local election campaigns, but I'm biased to say, of course, from Onward and all the great work we do, that always excites me and gets me out of bed in the morning. But I think we shouldn't be too down on these local issues, because obviously from a national perspective, it's not as exciting talking about house building or public service reform or spending billions of pounds. But I think across the country, one of the things we released at Onward this week is our Social Fabric Index, which is an index of every single seat in the country and all the places about how they're feeling about their sense of community and their sense of pride in place and where they feel things are getting more prosperous. And we did this first in 2020, we've done it again this year. And what's interesting in the post-pandemic landscape is obviously the economies of these places have taken a hit, but their sense of community is still strong, but it is weaker in those parts of the country that need levelling up the most. And I think one big issue that I've picked up from candidates on both sides has been antisocial behaviour. It's starting to become a real issue for both parties, because if people are looking at the places they live, you're talking about, you know, you want to give more prosperity. You can't have more prosperity. People don't feel safe on their streets.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of candidates have pushed that. So even though these small issues of potholes, there's been lots of, I think, Tory candidates staring at big potholes that then got covered up in Darlington. I think that was that example. That does go into a much bigger thing about how people feel about their place and their pride, which then feeds into the national picture.
Yeah.